All right, call to order. As we begin today's meeting, we would like to acknowledge that we are gathering here today on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and before them, the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Huron, and Wendat. We also acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and other global Indigenous people that now call Brampton their home. We are honored to live, work, and enjoy this land. Good evening and welcome to our meeting of Brampton's Planning and Development Committee. We will begin the meeting with calling the roll for attendance at tonight's meeting.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the following members are present. Yourself in person, Councillor Vicente, Councillor Tour, Councillor Power. Chair Paleshi sends his regrets for this evening's meeting, and participating online we have Councillor Santos, Councillor Brar, Councillor Keenan, and Councillor Fortini. And Councillor Medeiros, his office indicated he'll be late for the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, our next item is approval of the agenda. Does any member wish to add business items to today's meeting? Seeing none, we have a motion moved by Councillor Vicente to approve the agenda.
Through you, Mr. Acting Chair, just to advise that we do have additional correspondence that would be identified as number 32 regarding 11.4 on today's agenda. And this would be correspondence from Marshall Smith, dated August 28th from KLM Planning Partners on behalf of Foreside Estates Incorporated. And this is in regard to item 5.1 on today's agenda, the MTSA policies.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion moved by Councillor Vicente to approve the agenda. All in favor? The motion carries. Moving on, declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflicts of Interest Act. Do any members have a declaration of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act for any matter to be considered on today's agenda? Okay, seeing none, the clerk will note for the meeting minutes. Consent agenda. Our next item is a consent motion. I will read each agenda item that is subject to the consent motion, and any member may verbally identify the item to be held for debate during the meeting. Any item not held for debate will be considered as part of the consent motion and voted on for approval. I'll start reading the relevant agenda items, and members can identify any meeting to be held for debate. 7.1, staff report regarding application to amend the official plan, Callaway REIT, Brampton Inc., and with Smart Centers REIT. Anybody would like to hold this? Okay, not the staff report, so that is in consent. 7.2 is held for delegation, item 6.4. 7.3, staff report regarding application to amend the zoning bylaw 2820453 Ontario Inc., End of Con Limited, north side of Old Castlemore between Clarkway Drive and Highway 50, Gore 10. Okay, that is held by Councillor Tour. 7.4, application to amend the official plan zoning bylaw KLM Partners is held for delegation item 6.2. 11.1, correspondence from Mayor Annette Groves, Town of Caledon to Premier Doug Ford. Would anybody like to hold that? Seeing none, that is in consent. 11.2 is item 7.3, correspondence regarding application to amend the zoning bylaw 2820453 Ontario Inc., End of Con, north side of Old Castlemore between Clarkway Drive and Highway 50. That's the one. It's okay. Held. Councillor Tour. The clerk will summarize those items held by members for consideration or not part of the consent motion prior to approval of the motion.
Could I hold, sorry, Mr. Chair, could I hold the first item as well, please?
Which is staff report regarding application to amend the official plan Callaway REIT, Brampton Inc., and Smart Centers? Yeah. Okay.
So through you, Mr. Chair, to members of the committee, the only item for simplicity purposes that will be considered for the consent motion is 11.1, correspondence from Mayor Groves, Town of Caledon, to the Premier regarding illegal land use enforcement update.
Okay. I have a motion moved by Councillor Tour to approve the consent agenda. All in favor? Motion carries. Moving on to statutory public meeting reports. Our next section of tonight's agenda is the statutory public meeting item. We have 4 items listed in this section of the agenda. This is public meeting of the Planning and Development Committee held at a committee held in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act of Ontario. The proposals to be heard at the public meeting are the result of applications made under the Planning Act. These are not proposals of the City of Brampton unless they are specifically identified as city-initiated proposals. Tonight, 2 items are city-initiated proposals for a statutory public meeting, which are items 5.1 and 5.2. The intent of this public meeting is to receive submissions from the public regarding these proposals. I will read the 4 items to see if anyone is present tonight or pre-registered with the clerk's office to hear the staff presentation and or delegation on each item. 5.1, staff report regarding major transit station areas, draft Brampton plan policy citywide. We do have registered delegations, so we'll start with the staff presenting, and I'll pass it on to Commissioner Ganesh to kick us off. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much through the chair, Deputy Mayor Singh, and members of council at PDC tonight. You'll note that this staff report speaks to elements that are really the building block of our major transit station areas, or MTSAs, that will form a good part of the Brampton plan, or a new official plan coming forward later this year. The report you have before you speaks to various elements of those building blocks, whether they be employment, servicing, transportation, cultural heritage, and whatnot. On the employment side, you'll note that the report speaks to ratios that could be contemplated as staff review development applications coming forth in these major transit station areas. Just want to take this opportunity to reiterate that these ratios are really examples of sort of scenarios that could play out as staff review various development applications. They're not meant to be sort of carved in stone to hold up what staff would foresee as good development to promote mixed-use communities at any of our MTSA stations. They're basically as a sort of a conversation point. We all know that coming out of the pandemic, the nature of employment in Brampton and across Ontario, especially office employment, has evolved. And with that evolution, we need to demonstrate, at least in my opinion, a level of flexibility in our policy framework that you'll hear tonight from staff's presentation around employment lands. Also, since the pandemic, there have been a number of transformational game changers for Brampton, whether it be continued investment on our Kitchener GO line to have weekend service that'll promote our innovation corridor, the announcement of the TMU Med School that I'm sure will have spin-off effects across the city for innovation in whether it be R&D and medical research, or the forthcoming development of our City Lands project, which will be a world-class cricket stadium and hub of sports excellence. All of these transformational projects will lead to different types of employment that will find themselves in these MTSAs. So tonight, when you hear parts of the staff presentation, or as you see in the sort of draft report before you tonight for the public consultation, again, I just want to reiterate that the ratios are really examples for staff to use when they're contemplating development applications, but not meant to hold any one particular development application to a ratio. With that, I'll pass it over to staff to start off the presentation. And we also have Watson economists here to actually speak to some of the employment outlook for the MTSAs.
Thank you, Steve. Are you moving the slides? Okay. Good evening, members of committee, members of the public. My name is Claudia Loretta. I'm a principal planner with the planning department. And this evening, I will be presenting the draft policies for the major transit station areas, a city-initiated project that will be presented as part of Brampton Plan. Next slide, please. And before we get into the details of the policies, I'm sure most of you have heard major transit station areas, but just to understand what we refer to, and I'm going to refer to MTSAs throughout the presentation. So MTSAs are defined in the growth plan as an area between a 500 to an 800 meter radius from a higher order transit station area. And these are the areas of the city where we're focusing intensification. In Brampton, we have 3 categories of these MTSAs: the light rail transit along the Hurontario main corridor, the bus rapid transit along Queen Street, and the 3 GO stations along the Kitchener GO line. And the province and the region of Peel have set specific density targets for all these MTSAs. So for those MTSAs that are within the urban growth center, we're looking at a target of 200 people and jobs combined per hectare. For the bus rapid transit and the LRT, we're looking at a target of 160 population and jobs per hectare. And for the GO stations, we are looking at a target of 150 population and jobs per hectare. Next slide, please. So the region of Peel, through its official plan review, identified in Brampton 27 MTSAs, and as you can see on the screen, 14 of those have been classified as primary MTSAs. Those are the ones that have a defined boundary, seen in the color green, and those are identified as protected MTSAs for the purposes of the Planning Act. Those are the ones that we know that can meet the density requirements set up by the province. The ones that are shown on the schedule as a circle are identified as planned stations. So those are the stations that require a little bit more work in order for us to identify the actual boundaries of the station. And there's a third category in the region official plan that is classified as a secondary station. Those are the stations that we know won't be able to meet the density targets, and we will be requesting alternative density targets to the province. And right now, Brampton doesn't have any secondary stations. Next slide, please. So the region of Peel, which was approved by the province in November of last year, identifies a specific criteria for Brampton to undertake a land use study for all the MTSAs. And this land use study is required to determine the appropriate land uses and the density targets that are to be implemented for each one of these MTSAs. But in the absence of any current MTSA policies, Council adopted an official plan amendment in May of this year, which brings a short-term set of policies that allows us to review development applications in the interim, while Brampton plan and these MTSA policies are being adopted by Council. It is noted that this OPA is in effect, so it has been appealed and is not in effect yet. And as I mentioned, the Planning Act does require specific density targets for all these MTSAs. So those are the requirements that we're bringing forward as part of the public meeting this evening. Next slide, please. In terms of the MTSA study, we have divided this study into 4 phases. We finalized phase 1 with the preparation of the preliminary area land use plans that were presented to Planning Committee on July 31st of this year. That phase 1 also included a review of existing conditions and a technical work that will help us feed the future work that we're undertaking for the MTSAs. Next slide. So the purpose of tonight's public meeting is to present for the public review and feedback the proposed land use plans for each one of the 14 primary MTSAs. Those land use schedules are proposed to be added as schedules to Brampton Plan, and the policies that will bring specific density targets for each MTSAs are also proposed to be adopted as part of Brampton Plan in November of this year. Next slide, please. So the 14 land use schedules that we have prepared for the primary MTSAs were prepared with the intention, the objective of creating what we call complete communities, complete and walkable communities. And it is the intention to provide a full range of densities and land uses. And the City of Mississauga actually has received confirmation from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing that we're not able to impose maximum heights and density targets for MTSAs. However, it is still our intention through these land use schedules to show a gradient of heights and densities to provide different building typologies for all the land use designations that we're proposing. So as you can see on the screen, the dark brown is the area closest to the intersection. Those are the areas when we want to focus the majority of that density. And then it steps down the further away you are from the station towards the light yellow that shows all those stable residential neighborhoods where we don't really anticipate any change or any intensification over the horizon of this plan. Next slide. So, sorry, before you change the slide, I should mention as well that These land use plans do not currently reflect any development applications that are under review because council hasn't made a decision on those applications. But they will be processed, and if and when adopted by council, they will be adopted through site-specific amendments to Brampton Plan. Next slide. For the most part, we will be relying on the land use designations that are being brought forward as part of Brampton Plan, so like the neighborhoods, those mixed uses, the natural heritage system. But there are some designations that are very specific for those MTSAs. So we are proposing to create site-specific areas to be added to Chapter 4 in Brampton Plan for those designations. Next slide. In the case of the MTSAs that are within the employment areas, there are 4 MTSAs that are within the region's employment areas, and those are shown here on the schedule. So they are required to meet specific employment targets. The 3 stations are shown in the red circles, which are Steeles at Mississauga, Bramalea Go, and the Gore Station. They are subject to a flexible employment policy framework in the region's official plan. So through our MTSA work, we are able to determine the appropriate amount of non-employment uses that will be added to these MTSAs, subject to a specific criteria in the region's official plan. However, the Ray Lawson MTSA station is not subject to this flexible policy framework. So the land uses that we're showing as part of the office mixed use designation that we're proposing will only be able to be permitted as part of an amendment to the region's official plan. Next slide. So as I mentioned, for these 4 employment MTSAs, we are creating an office mixed use designation. These 4 MTSAs are the focus of our employment growth. Through that office mixed use designation, it is the intention to allow non-employment uses such as residential and commercial uses. But in order for us to understand the appropriate amount of those non-employment uses, we retain the services of Watson and Associates to help us understand what would be an appropriate amount of employment uses that would be required for each one of these MTSAs. And Jamie Cook from Watson and Associates is here this evening, so he will be presenting an overview of the land use, of the market study that was undertaken for those 4 MTSAs. Next slide. And in addition to this market study, we're also undertaking 3 additional technical studies. One is a transportation master study, a master servicing study, and a cultural heritage study. The region of Peel is undertaking a water and wastewater assessment based on the population numbers that are being generated through these MTSA schedules. And that information will feed into the master servicing plan that we will be undertaking as part of this study. Next slide. I mentioned before that we are required by the province to meet specific density targets. So what we are proposing is to add what we call floor space index or floor area ratio for all of these MTSAs. But as I mentioned, we are not allowed to impose maximum density targets. So these floor space indexes that we're looking into to add into the Brampton Plan policies would only be minimums, which is what is required as the Planning Act legislation. Next slide, please. The land uses have been prepared with the Housing Brampton, the housing target, the housing pledge in mind. We are calculating what population and what type of units will be generated based on each one of the land use schedules for the MTSAs. And with the exception of one of the MTSAs, the remaining 13 will significantly exceed the requirements of the Planning Act in terms of density targets. So we will undertake a full review to understand how these primary MTSAs will assist the city in achieving the Housing Municipal Pledge. Next slide. So this slide shows the overall project timeline for the MTSA project. As I mentioned, we just finalized phase 1. And given the legislative requirements to bring forward our policies before the end of this year, phase 2 has been divided into 2 specific areas. So one is what we're being presenting today, the land use schedules and the maximum density targets that will be accompanied by Brampton Plan in November. And then the second phase, the second part of phase 2 will be actually the detailed policies that we will be implementing, either through amendments to the specific secondary plans or through new precinct plans that will be created for each one of those MTSAs. We are targeting early 2024 to finalize those secondary plans or precinct plan amendments. Once we conclude these precinct plans and secondary plan amendments, we have up until November of 2024 to complete the zoning for all of these MTSAs and the urban design guidelines. And the last phase of the MTSA study will be for all the plan stations that were shown before in the circles. So basically phases 1 to 3 for all the plan MTSAs. So we are expecting to initiate that work post 2024. Next slide. And as I mentioned, the policies that we're bringing today are at an official plan level, so it is still our intention to undertake subsequent official plan amendments at the secondary plan or precinct plan level. And we are targeting Q1 of 2024 for those amendments. Next slide. In terms of the next steps for the policies that are being presented today, we have circulated these amendments internally and to the public agencies for review. And all the comments that we receive as part of the public meeting will be addressed as part of the future recommendation report that will be brought forward as part of Brampton Plan for adoption in November. Once Brampton Plan is adopted, it's subject to an appeal period of 20 days. Next slide. And the report and this presentation have been added to the meetings and agenda page. We do have a dedicated mailbox, so any comments and feedback can be directed to our mailbox, mtsa@brampton.ca. Next slide. And with that, I conclude the presentation, and I will pass it on to Jamie for the Watson's review of the office.
Thank you, Claudia, and good evening, members of committee and members of the public. I'm going to be presenting the summary of our findings of our commercial market assessment report for the MTSAs, the 4 MTSAs that Claudia had identified in her presentation that are located within employment areas. Before we get started, my name is Jamie Cook, and I am a managing partner with Watson & Associates. And I'm also here with my colleague Brad Post, who's a senior coordinator with Watson & Associates, who worked on the study. So if we go to the first slide, just to start off in terms of the purpose of the study, we were retained. Just let that load up.
Just bear with us a moment. We're just having a technical issue.
There we go, great. So as I was mentioning, our firm was retained back in the spring of 2023 to prepare a market assessment of 4 strategic major transit station areas, or MTSAs, and accommodating office development for the city to the year 2051. Building on the direction provided by the city, 4 strategic MTSAs have been identified. These areas are adjacent to employment areas and provide the potential to support the integration of employment within employment areas, as well as with non-employment uses in adjacent residential areas. And those 4 areas are the Ray Lawson MTSA, the Steeles at Mississauga MTSA, the Gore MTSA, and the Bramalea Go MTSA. I also just wanted to mention that earlier this year as well, in the spring, our firm was retained to work on the Bram West Secondary Plan with tool design, and that work also forms some of the background to the market assessment for the Steels at Mississauga MTSA. Next slide. So before we get into the details of the Brampton analysis, I want to provide a bit of background on the overall market outlook for office development within Brampton, within the context of the Greater Toronto Area, including Hamilton. So to start off, currently there's about 23 million square meters of office space today in the GTA alone, excluding Hamilton in this stat. That's the 6th largest market for office development in North America. And looking at the overall outlook for office development, we took a look at each of the municipal comprehensive review studies that were completed in the last several years for each of the single-tier and upper-tier municipalities across the Greater Toronto Area and Hamilton. And this is what is shown here in this slide. What this identifies is that in those, collectively in those reports, a total of about 435,000 jobs are identified in the category of major office employment for the GTA alone. When you add the city of Hamilton, that number is about almost 470,000 over the 30-year projection period. Within the region of Peel, about 110,000 office jobs have been identified for the region, and of that total, just under half of those jobs are identified for the city of Brampton at 54,300 total office jobs. When we're speaking about major office, we're defining major office as freestanding office buildings, 20,000 square feet or greater, or about 1,860 square meters or greater. When we look at the overall outlook for office, as Commissioner Ganesh pointed out, it is really important to recognize the impacts that COVID-19 and the pandemic overall has had on the office market in recent years, and how it will continue to influence and impact the market moving forward. So we have taken a deep look at that, and recognizing that the impacts of COVID, really what it did is it accelerated changes and technological disruptions that were really already in place prior to the pandemic, but ultimately those disruptions were accelerated during the pandemic, and ultimately those disruptions we would continue to express that those disruptions will continue over the long term. But what we would identify is that the overall market for office development is still strong, but it is changing. We're seeing more of a demand for higher classes of office space in Class A and some Class B office space, with more focus on activity-based workspaces, including collaboration rooms, hot desking, larger kitchens, a variety of desk options, virtual conferences, rest areas and recreation rooms, etc. So there is still a need for office space in the future, but this space is being more focused on quality space in amenity-rich areas. Clearly, one of the other biggest factors that we've seen out of the pandemic is the impact that it has had on increased work-at-home employment and hybrid workers. So in taking a look at these numbers, we have made some reductions to the Brampton forecast. So the first thing that we have done is we have reduced the overall forecast that's in the Peel allocation for Brampton of 54,300 by about 20% to about just under 43,000 total office jobs. Another adjustment we have made is that we've reduced the floor space per worker average. So in the work that we completed for Peel Region as part of the development charges background study, we assumed an average of 28 square meters per employee. We have reduced that number by 40% to a total of 17 square feet per employee. So those are two fairly significant adjustments that we have made that have ultimately resulted in a reduction to the overall amount of employment and space needs within the city of Brampton over the next 3 decades. Next slide. So building on that overall context, we have provided a forecast for each of the targeted office-focused MTSAs. Starting with the Mississauga Steels MTSA, we've identified just under 6,000 total major office jobs. That's about 14% of the total major office jobs for the city. Based on that assumption of 17 square meters per employee, that results in about 100,800 square meters of major office space over the next 3 decades. For Ray Lawson, we've identified just under 3,500 major office jobs with a total of just under 59,000 square meters. For the Gore MTSA, we've identified just under 2,500 major office jobs and just under 42,000 square meters of major office employment. And lastly, for the Bramley Go MTSA, we've identified 4,900 major office jobs and about 83,500 square meters of total major office floor space. So in total, these 4 MTSAs comprise just under 40% of the overall amount of major office development that we've identified for the city of Brampton over the next 3 decades. The other, just over 60% of major office development has been identified throughout the rest of the city, including the downtown area, for a total of just under 43,000 major office jobs and about 729,000 square meters. So a few other points I want to make on this slide is we've also looked at the overall yield for major office development in each of these MTSAs. We've identified that by 2051, collectively, the MTSAs that we've identified here would be about 30% built out. So there's still significant room to accommodate higher densities and additional office space beyond the 2051 period. I would also note that just to give you some context in terms of the amount of office space that's currently under application right now, there's about 6 large-scale and more smaller-scale office developments under active proposal right now, totaling about 60,000 square meters of office development. So it just gives you a bit of an idea of how that pipeline compares to this forecast over the next 3 decades. So building on that analysis, we did identify a number of strategic recommendations in our report. If we can go to the next slide. The first recommendation is the need for monitoring. Clearly, as I've mentioned, there is a need to be monitoring the absorption of office development across the city of Brampton, the nature of work and the impacts over the long term from the pandemic need to clearly continue to be monitored in terms of trends related to work at home and the impacts of hybrid work and the impacts that that's ultimately having on space needs. We're also recommending the use of targets. As identified, there are a number of specific targets for density in terms of average persons and jobs per hectare within the MTSAs, ranging from 150 to 160 people and jobs per hectare. Those targets should be identified and supported through the work that we've done in our analysis that would suggest that those density targets are appropriate. We're also recommending targets with respect to the distribution of the major office development by the 4 MTSAs that we've identified here that are strategically directed for office use. Next slide. We also provided recommendations with respect to the timing and prioritization of office development. Given the overall existing market demand and existing presence of office space in the Mississauga at Steeles and Ray Lawson MTSA, we have identified these MTSAs as near-term priorities for office development. Given the lack of a stronger presence of office development within the Bramley Go and the Gore MTSA, we've identified these areas as both a short-term and longer-term priority. We've also recommended the consideration of other forms of employment uses within the MTSAs other than major office development, including opportunities for population-related retail and other commercial uses. As well, where appropriate, we also have identified that industrial uses could be considered, provided that those uses are deemed to be appropriate and don't propose land use conflicts with the surrounding uses in the MTSA. And this is something that is identified in the proposed provincial policy statement with respect to planning for industrial development in employment areas and non-employment areas. Next slide. We've also provided recommendations with respect to the protection of MTSA's, office development in MTSA's over the long term, as these areas do represent strategic locations to attract and accommodate office development over the long-term planning horizon. We're recommending the city provides policies which would encourage and direct major office employment and other forms of office within these office-focused MTSAs. And in addition, we've also identified the recommendation for the support of amenities in MTSAs to support vibrant urban setting of development that would accommodate and attract office tenants within these MTSAs. And we've identified the need for the city to work with the region of Peel, the school boards, and other public agencies to enable the timely delivery of community facilities, parks, and infrastructure to further enhance office development in these MTSAs. Next slide. So in conclusion, I also want to note that we have received a report that was prepared by Altus in November of 2021 that specifically focuses on the market for office development in the Mississauga at Steeles MTSA. We are currently reviewing that report, and we are scheduled to provide a response and documentation of our response to that report in the next 2 to 3 weeks to the city. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to take any questions you may have.
All right, do any members have any questions? No. No, seeing none. All right, thank you. Fine? Oh, okay. Next is Andrew from WND Associates. You have only 5 minutes, though.
I will try to keep it less than that. Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of committee. My name is Andrew Franchik. I'm the principal of W&D Associates. We're the planners that are retained by the owners of 200 County Court Boulevard, and that's located at the southeast corner of here, Ontario, and County Court Boulevard, which is currently a retail plaza known as the County Court Centre. We had 2 very positive pre-consultation meetings with city staff earlier this year, and I'm happy to say that that followed by an application submission for a 5-tower development consisting primarily of residential uses. In fact, 1,900 residential uses, in addition to ground floor commercial uses, which would replace the plaza that's essentially there now. We think this is a great development for the city of Brampton, and this is kind of a gateway into the southern part of the city. When we reviewed the MTSA report, we did have 2 serious concerns. It's no surprise that one of them was actually touched on a little bit already in terms of the office policy encouraging a higher level of office than we think is feasible and something that we really think needs a harder look. And we're happy to hear, I think, beginnings of that tonight, and we'd like to continue that discussion as well. The other concern that we have is with MTSAs, there will be a higher focus for the type of intensification that's expected within these areas. And one of the things that we noticed was, whereas currently in the secondary plan, there is no transition policy that applies to the subject site, now staff are proposing to introduce a new transition policy that did not exist from the south. And we think that's a concern for achieving the level of intensification that we think is appropriate on the site, and which we think was quite supported by city staff when we met with them earlier this year. So we'd like to just point out those concerns and hope that we can continue the dialogue and meet with staff and yourselves to refine the proposed policies before they become policies. Thank you very much.
Okay, do any members have any questions? Anybody online? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I would just ask that the chair be heard. I have some points. Yeah. I just had some comments about the MTSA, 2 in particular. One is, I know we're looking at ratios, but I'd like for us to look at ratios of the division between 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom homes. because other municipalities who have moved towards density, you see a big push for one-bedroom homes, and these are areas where, you know, we expect a lot of small families. If you're having one child, two child, you need more space. And so I would like to see us pay attention to that. That would be my first comment. My second comment would be around sustainability metrics. So, you know, the province is moving towards more density. We have the Building Homes Faster Act, but we need to do it in a sustainable way. So making sure we're looking at net zero developments, we're making sure we're holding the line on those things, because, you know, when we talk about the future, that's going to become more and more important. You know, this is, the density is obviously going to help the development industry, but it's our jobs to make sure that that development is happening in a sustainable way. So I would like some attention paid to that when the final report comes back. So those were my comments on this. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay. Councilor Vicente.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would be happy to move receipts of the report and the recommendations, but also like to request an amendment that that the city clerk be directed to forward a copy of the information report and council resolution to the region appeal, which is contained here, but also add that it's also forwarded to our local MPPs and the MPs, because I think that it's important that they're aware of the work that we're doing here at the City of Brampton, and it's part and parcel of our advocacy work following AMO and the work that we're doing to ask that they fund infrastructure, et cetera, in the City of Brampton. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And because these are part of the statutory public meeting section, do any members of the public have anything to say about MTSAs or what you heard? Going once, going twice. Okay, we have a motion moved by Councilor Vicente to receive the delegations and to receive the correspondence. Anybody opposed? And the staff recommendations as amended. Anybody opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that carries. Okay, moving on. We don't have any registered delegations, but if anybody in the public would like to hold 5.2 staff presentation regarding city-initiated zoning bylaw amendment 5556, 5600, and 5620 Countryside Drive. Would anybody like to see that presentation? Okay, so we have members of the public, so I will ask staff to come down and present.
Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee, members of the public, and city staff. My name is Simran Sandhu, and I'm the city contact for this city-initiated zoning bylaw amendment. The purpose of this public meeting is to provide information to the public and seek feedback on the city-initiated zoning bylaw amendment. Next slide, please. The subject properties are located in Ward 10 and are municipally known as 5556, 5600, and 5620 Countryside Drive. The properties are located east of Coleraine Drive and north of Countryside Drive. Next slide, please. The subject properties, this map shows an overview of the subject properties and the surrounding land uses. To the north is agricultural lands. To the south is Countryside Drive, beyond which are future industrial uses. To the east are agricultural lands, beyond which is Highway 50. And to the west are proposed institutional uses subject to an MZO, beyond which are agricultural lands. Next slide, please. The following shows an aerial satellite image of the subject properties. The subject properties front Countryside Drive, and further down east is Highway 50. Next slide, please. The following slide shows photos from the site visit conducted. The first picture depicts the views of the properties from the intersection of Countryside Drive and Coleraine Drive facing northeast. The second picture depicts views of the properties from Countryside Drive facing west. Next slide, please. The pictures on this slide show the two properties at 5600 and 5620 Countryside Drive facing north. Next slide, please. The city-initiated zoning bylaw amendment is to facilitate the development of a permanent office use and associated outdoor storage use for truck and trailer parking. The zoning bylaw will also permit non-industrial uses in conjunction with the office use. Internal vehicle access will be provided for the proposed office. A holding symbol will be placed on the subject properties and will be lifted once arrangements are made to consolidate the properties, execute a site plan, and post financial securities. Next slide, please. Prior to finalizing recommendations and advancing an associated final report to council, this development application will further be evaluated for compliance with the Planning Act as amended, consistency with the provincial policy statement and conformity to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe as amended, and conformity to the in effect Region of Peel official plan, the City of Brampton official plan, and its Highway 427 industrial secondary plan. Next slide, please. The subject properties for the proposed zoning bylaw amendment are designated as industrial in the and are within the country corridor protection area in the City of Brampton's official plan, which permits a full range of industrial activities ranging from light to heavy industrial uses such as manufacturing, processing, repair and service, warehousing, and distribution. The proposed development does not require an amendment to the official plan. Next slide, please. The subject properties are within the Highway 427 industrial secondary plan and are designated as Prestige Industrial and Heritage Resource. The proposed development for an office use falls within this use, and an amendment to the secondary plan is therefore not required to permit the office use. To permit the outdoor storage of truck and trailer parking, an amendment to the secondary plan may be required. Next slide, please. The properties are zoned agricultural and residential real estate 2. These zones permit agricultural uses and select non-agricultural uses along with residential uses. An amendment to the zoning bylaw amendment is required to facilitate the proposed development. Next slide, please. The city-initiated amendment to the zoning bylaw proposes to amend the current agricultural and residential real estate zones to an industrial zone with office use and accessory outdoor storage use for truck and trailer parking. The proposed zoning bylaw will also include a holding provision. Next slide, please. At this time, preliminary issues that will need to be addressed include potential amendments to the secondary plan to permit the proposed accessory outdoor storage use. The capacity of public roads to allow for truck traffic is currently prohibited or restricted. The proposed outdoor storage use will need to be appropriately screened from public view and adjacent properties. These issues and others that are raised will be addressed in future recommendation report. Next slide, please. Staff is hosting a statutory public meeting this evening to share information of the proposed city-initiated zoning bylaw amendment on the subject properties and provide an opportunity for members of the public to express comments, perspectives, and opinions. Staff will advance a final recommendation report for council decision in the future based on the details of the proposed development and applicable planning laws and policies, while incorporating comments and considerations from community members, technical reviewers, and stakeholders. Staff will also follow up with members of the public and other stakeholders who have spoken, written in, or advised of an interest in monitoring this proposal. Next slide, please. This public meeting presentation will be available online as part of the Planning and Development Committee meeting minutes shortly. The final recommendation report will be posted on the city's PDC meeting agenda in advance of the future meeting. For any questions or comments about the city-initiated zoning bylaw amendment, please contact myself, and my contact information is shown on the screen. Next slide, please. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you and have a great evening.
Okay, that completes the staff presentation. Do any members of the public? You may come down and register, and then you can ask your question or state your feedback. Get over there.
56. I can't counselor who has failed to call me numerous times, and this whole amendment has been addressed by me. I've had concerns about what's going on in the area. The fact that the road is not to code, transport trucks are continuously going in the ditch, knocking over the traffic lights, impeding flow of traffic, and nothing is either reported by the OPP, and it's becoming lawless, okay? There seems to be a hidden agenda here that is going on. Letters aren't answered, and we have the situation going on right now with Stephen Clark and Ford, and Brampton has nothing less than what they're doing. Because what's going on with all the trucks, and they're popping up, and there's over 300 properties that are impacted currently in Caledon, it has to be addressed. If there is a need for these trucks, then there is a planning department, and you can't just impede all this without regulations, maintaining the laws and safety of the residents and the people transiting these roads. So I have a concern that anything will be done until that road is widened, because we have trucks every day going out of control. And, you know, there's no way that you can have more parking, because currently 5556 is parking the floats with heavy equipment on the road, which is narrow and impedes traffic coming this way, okay, west. So how many trucks are on that property? How many was the plan subjected to have on that property? Okay, I think they're over, and I don't think anyone is paying attention. They were given a temporary zoning, and now we're doing this amendment to accommodate that, because it's only a 3-year temporary zoning. I don't understand why we even have such a thing as a temporary zoning. And all of my concerns I have addressed in writing to all the people in the various departments. Nobody has answered or phoned me back, including Mayor Brown and including my ward rep, Singh. Okay? Now, it's the same thing as Stephen Clark going in front of the camera saying, I didn't see the email, I don't know who this Amato is, etc. People are a little sick of the crime syndicate that seems to be encroaching in our government offices. I don't care, it's true, all right? Because the fact that this is going on and you just think you can bulldoze over people is ridiculous,
All right,
all right?
thank you.
So the road has to be widened, and the fact that the 5556 started that work without permits, cut trees without permits, and when bylaw shows up, doesn't give me their name, doesn't give me a business card, which I addressed, and I'm now making it public so that people know, because I'm sure they've run into the same situation as I have. Okay, people are buying beautiful homes in the area, and then they're backing onto Mayfield, and they're having to look at all these trucks and all the dust. So if you want to have them, you have to designate areas, because we still have empty lands. But you can't just have them sprouting out overnight. There's another one called the Sultan on Coleraine. This I'm being told by someone from Peel Waterway that came to the house the other few weeks ago to close off our water because they were widening the road at Coleraine. Now, supposedly this man has all these containers on that 25 acres illegally. He was fined $125,000, and now he's appealing it. So what we're doing is we are tying up our courts for individuals to have to take these on, or the city. What does he care for a $125,000 fine? With all those containers there, he's making how much a month? How many containers on 25 acres? Okay? So where is the conflict of interest here for the city to allow this to go on? And the 5556, and it's public knowledge on the internet, was fined $1 million in Caledon. The same day that the Supreme Court judge handed down that ruling, Patrick Brown gives him this temporary zoning. And he starts digging up culverts, cutting down trees, putting in illegal driveways without permits. All right? Now, I've lived at my address since 1970, okay? We've always followed the rules. And I don't understand what this body is doing, but playing games or is in cahoots with the builders or these truck companies.
All right,
But
so
something's going
okay.
on and we want answers.
all due
This
respect, I gave
amendment
you-
cannot go
sorry,
forward,
okay.
I'm just gonna finish up,
Okay.
until the proper roadways are done. Because right now, I have not seen any inspectors on that road to see all of the damage.
Okay, thank you. And please register your name on the back. You'll see somebody there with the clipboard. Anybody else have any? Yep.
Hi. Just had a quick question. Oh, my name is Tony. Last name is Pilati, Pilotti. I just had one question in regards to the presentation. In the change of zoning, if it is to go through, there was a mention for outdoor storage would be allowed. However, for truck or trailer parking, that an amendment would be required. Did I hear that correctly?
Staff can clarify that.
Prohibited, or it needs an amendment? It was just a little unclear.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. So the proposal does put forward the opportunity to have truck storage on the site in a permanent sense, provided that a headquarters office structure is constructed on the site as well. As it relates to the official plan, it noted that there is no official plan that's needed. As it relates to the secondary plan, there is some policy that staff are looking at a little bit closer to confirm whether there is a need for a further amendment to the secondary plan. In our review of the secondary plan policies, we've come to understand that there is some permissions there, but we may need an amendment to ensure that there's really clarity for everyone reading the policy itself. So we're contemplating that right now. And if it is that there is an amendment needed in that respect, we'll be bringing it forward as well.
So building would be required and it would need to be screened in, if I heard that correctly. For that particular use, there'd be, I guess, a privacy screening of some kind required.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman. So with the use as contemplated here tonight, it would be subject to a later site plan application review, and all of those matters in respect of screening, any fencing or noise walls that might be needed between the proposed use on this property and other properties. Those matters will be looked at through site plan. As it relates to the zoning bylaw that's being proposed at this point in time, there may be some verbiage included within the amendment on those matters as well, but we'll be looking at that a little bit closer as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please register. And do any other members have any questions?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, Alan Parsons, Director of Development Services at the City of Brant.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions from the public, I have a motion moved by Councillor Powers to approve the staff report and receive the delegations. All in favor? Thank you. That carries. Moving on to 5.3, do I have any members of the public? The delegation is just a planner on the file, I believe, right? The delegation is just a planner on the file. Yeah, I'll ask if he is, I'll just ask right now. Is Stefan Statu here?
Yep, I'm here, just calling.
Okay, are you the planner on the file?
I am the planning consultant on the file.
On the file?
Yes.
Okay, we don't have any members of the public asking, do any members of the public, are you request, no? About staff presentation on MHBC on behalf of Canada's Logistics, 0 Goreway Drive, Ward 8. 0 Goreway Drive, Ward 8. Do any, seeing that we have no members of the public asking questions, do you still wish to delegate?
I don't believe that's necessary.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So we'll just receive the staff report. I'll have Council Powers move it. Anybody opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that carries. Moving on to 5.4 is a staff presentation, application to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw King Consultants, Inc. on behalf of 100044690 Ontario, Inc. Mr. Zero, sorry, okay. And Navjot Dami, 10209 Bremley Road, Ward 9. Does anybody, any members of the public wish to hear the staff presentation? Going once, going twice. Okay, I have a motion moved by Councillor Vicente to approve the staff report and receive the delegation. All in favor? Motion carries. After receiving any delegations, members of the committee may ask questions of clarification. I think we can go on. We'll move on to staff reports.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have delegations. The next would be, in order, would be 6.2, delegations regarding item 7.4 on tonight's agenda, and there are 5 registered delegates.
Okay, so we have delegation regarding application to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw, KLM Planning Partners, Inc., with Carl Markel Developments, 1724 and 1730 Queen Street West, Ward 5. First, we have Marshall Smith.
To be with you this evening. Marshall Smith of KLM Planning Partners here on behalf of Cal Markel Developments, Inc. They're the owner of the lands located at 1724 and 1730 Queen Street West. This is the northeast corner of Elburn Markel Drive. I did submit a presentation that I'm hoping to share with you this evening. I believe it should be on the chamber computer here. Perfect. So again, Marshall Smith of KLM Planning Partners. I'm a registered professional planner, an associate with KLM, and also representing Cal Markel Developments, Inc. If we could go to the next slide, please. These are applications for an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment. We've been working closely with staff over the last year and a half to resolve issues, and we're very glad to be here today to speak with you about the changes that have been made, and in response not only to the comments that we received, but the input from the public through the entire process that we've been through. So sites identified in yellow on the screen here, you can see the red and the yellow bubbles that represent in red the 400-meter walking radius, what you can practically get to within a 5-minute walk of the site. Yellow's a 800-meter radius, what you can practically get to in a 10-minute walk of the site. So this site's very well served by public transit. There are about 18 bus stops within walking distance of the site today. You can see that it's within an area where there's, I guess, several sites that are undeveloped, primarily to the east of the site, and that's the Springbrook Tertiary Plan area, which I'll speak to a little bit further on in the presentation. Next slide. You can see the subject land's location in the Credit Valley secondary plan, and the pink line actually represents that Springbrook tertiary plan that's currently going through a city-initiated process to increase density for the lands fronting Queen Street West. Next slide, please. Shows the lands in context for that draft city-initiated tertiary plan. This is still undergoing changes, but this site is in a key location as a gateway into that tertiary plan area. Next slide. So this is the original plan. There's, on the original plan, an 18-story and a 14-story tower fronting Queen Street West. That's on a shared 6-story podium, and then there are stacked townhouses to the north as part of the transition to the existing low-density residential dwellings. Now, I guess I should mention that from the right of the page to the left of the page, or from the south to the north, there's about a 5-meter to 6-meter grade difference. So we're going down a hill as we move from the existing residential dwellings towards Queen Street, and this is why the density and the massing's been organized on the site towards Queen Street West in order to minimize impacts to residents to the north. So something else I should point out, things that have not changed in the plan, there is 2 access points off of Elburn Markel Drive, and the number of units at 650 has remained static from this plan. There was a total of 705 square meters of shared amenity space to serve the development at grade, and that's changed in this in the updated proposal that's before you today. Next slide, please. This is the updated proposal. So from the point of the original applications, the tower heights have gone from 18 and 14 to 16 and 14 stories. So the towers have come down in height in response to comments that we received from the public. And additional amenity space to serve the development has also been introduced. So we went from 705 square meters to 2,300 square meters of shared amenity space at grade. Next slide. This is the original landscape plan. You can see the amount of green on the slide. If we could move on to the next. And this is the current landscape plan, which shows that there's been significant attention to introduce further landscaping and plantings, both within the site and around the extents of the site. Next slide. This is the rooftop amenity space, 315 square meters that would serve the units inside of the building. Next slide. Some conceptual massing. This is looking southeast if you were on Elburn Markel Drive at the top of the development. Next slide. Some views of the tower and podium itself. Next slide. And some views of those stacked townhouses. And just to wrap up on the next slide, this demonstrates the transition for this property to the properties north and south of the site as well. So the entire development fits within a 45-degree angular plane from the north property line, also from the south side of Queen Street West. And you can see that there's a dashed line coming from that reddish dwelling on the left side of the page that represents the existing dwelling, the permitted zoning height today. All of the stacked townhouses fit below, I guess, the maximum permitted height on that executive residential lot. We're about 20 meters to the nearest building face from that building face, and we're over 135 meters to the tower itself from that existing dwelling space. So it's very far away, and very importantly, there's a mature tree line at the north property line.
If you
also
could
being
wrap up,
retained.
your 5 minutes are up.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. There's that mature coniferous tree line, the north property line that's proposed to be maintained. That would provide year-round visual buffering between the two uses. This is my presentation. Thank you so much for hearing me out.
Thank you. Next, we have Ramaljeet Sandhu.
Good evening. I'm a resident in the neighborhood where this is planned, the proposed development, and I have several concerns that are not addressed in the recommendation report, which I read through and through. I feel like when I bought this property, I spent all my earnings into it, and it is one of the executive homes, and I will be facing those big towers. My backyard would be facing those big towers. I will not be able to swim in my swimming pool anymore, I think. And that's not only me, that's all my neighbors. They might not be here today, but I represent them. I know that the noise and the shadowing impact has been considered and it's been mentioned there, but it's very minimal change, the way I read it. The environmental concerns have just been addressed about the woodlot that's on the east, nothing else. I think the amount of vegetation that's shown right now by the planner is the amount of vegetation I probably have in my property, just to say. And I probably don't have time to elaborate on all the extinct species and all the other environmental concerns, but I hope this will not pass through the environmental committee. And besides that, what about the schools? Like, they haven't said anything about the infrastructure, about the schools, the doctors, the hospitals, to just name a few. And none of this has shown up on the recommendation report. There are already 2 stacks of 2 properties with a lot of the townhouses that are already being built. One, the people have moved in, the other one not so much. And there has not been another school. So I'm sure all these kids who are in those townhouses will be going into portables. And I know that my child should not be going into a portable. Being a teacher, I know that there is, it's very hard in the winter, very hard in the summer, also no running water. Like, really? Would anybody want their child to be in there? So these towers and the townhouses coming up, I feel like it's probably going to need a school of its own. 600, 700 residences. And like you said, there should be housing, more housing, but really sustainability is the key. Also, it's not compatible with the future plan. In section 2, I think they mentioned it, 2Q. The sustainability score on the recommendation report says 47, which is bronze level. Why isn't city or the planning department coming up with sustainability score, which is gold level instead of bronze level? There are no highways close by. There is no hospital. There is no strip plaza. There is no mall. There is no GO station. So what are we looking at? BRT? I don't know how many, the planner included the bus stations, but really, I don't think there are 18. I've counted them. And I have a bus stop right, which I can see through my window. People are waiting there for good 20 minutes for bus each morning. Really? Is that what you're looking at? Last but not the least, it's not going to build a complete community like it says in the recommendation report. Yes, there will be probably a selling point that this would be in the middle of executive homes and close to the Credit River. That's probably the selling point. But really, it's not a complete, it's not going to be a complete community. Thank you.
Next is Rohit Dhawan.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Rohit Dhawan. I'm a resident of at 22 Elburn Markle Drive, and I represent the Credit Valley Residents Association. And we have about 358, around 360 signatures on a petition against this development. And my house is, one of the entrances of this development is going to be right almost across my house, and will further increase speeding and traffic in the area. About 10 years back, I had requested for speed humps in the area, which was never provided. And I strongly oppose this development. The high rises we're not against development, but against the high rises, which are not compatible with this existing community. In one of the presentations by the City of Brampton, Kelly Anderson had mentioned it's executive housing on one side, executive housing on the other side, and we're trying to put 2 towers right in the middle. Again, anything that is compatible with the neighborhood, definitely we're not against development. So based on my previous delegation on this file and delegations by other members of the CVRA from today and in the past, from Samir, DP, Satinder, Ramaljeet, I strongly oppose the high rises part of this development. Thank you.
Next is Jasveer Singh.
Good evening, Chair and council members and my CVRA representatives. And I'm representing CVRA. I'm one of the directors. And they will be listening to this after we finish. And like what my predecessors have just said, that we are against this, development totally. And I do not want to repeat what they have said. Most of that they have said I would have to cover again. But I want to save your time and the time of the public to go forward. And what we have to say is, we are being told that the development proposal is in line with provincial mandate for the city. That's what has been told by council to us. However, we talked with provincial representatives, and we do not see that alignment, and are told that province does not prescribe where to build. They just tell you to build, and they will give you the so-called incentives. So council is pushing to the representatives of CRA that province has told us to do this. So we have done some digging, and thank God we did that. So maybe we can get an official document showing the alignment of the council and the province, and a request to see this file. Not only this file, but others along Queen Street and Mississauga. We are never against development. Developing countries grow, but development in a sustainable way. And I totally agree with Mr. Chair. And I 100%, I'm sure they agree too, that about density, it should be in a sustainable way. And thank you for saying that. And I hope council take heed to the chair. If it's not taking heed to the residents, please take heed to the chair, because he's your learned person. Because you are not taking heed to us, because we feel we are not the learned ones, right? So if you don't do it in a sustainable way, I hope council will be here when we talk about the disaster that you people created. Look at all the other cities all over the world. They are examples for you. Why can't we go into the bad examples and say, hey, we shouldn't do this? Very simple. I studied city planners of Singapore. They did infrastructure first and then development. Why? Ramanjit told you about infrastructure. We have zipped infrastructure from the time council has been going at us. Zero. So where are you going to put the 650 unit, say 1.65 per unit children? Where are you going to house them? In schools. What sort of schools are you looking at? Are you creating a ghetto here? And mind my words, in the next 10 years, I will bring this recording up and say where council made a mistake. Because we believe that we should have communication with council. Council are trying their best, but the citizens and the residents are trying their utter best. We are not stopping anybody, but please give us a listening ear. And Council has also told me, I do not want to mention names, that we do not have infrastructure because infrastructure costs money, and that is the reason why you are not developing outwards, because infrastructure costs you a lot. So where is the money being put? So you already have infrastructure, you just keep building upwards. That's a point of disaster. So, and we are seeing it happen.
Mr. Jasbir Singh, I've been kind and let you go over quite a bit. If you could just wrap up.
Okay. We are seeing it happen, and it is happening all over the world. One last question, or one last suggestion. I'm sorry I'm saying this, that, you know, I studied Singapore extensively, and why they are so successful, why they are number one. Go and look at them. Because they went to develop their mass rapid transit. Study that. I studied it. What they did was send their representatives out to all the big mass rapid transit systems in the world. London being the oldest, Paris having pneumatic wheels for sound, Spain, Barcelona, New York, and all the big cities. And guess what? They came up, and the bosses told them, I do not want you to tell me, oh, this is wonderful. Tell me, when you go there and ask them, what mistakes did you make? The reverse. And they took all the mistakes that they made and they omitted them. So simple.
Okay,
I was
thank you.
shocked.
Thank you. We're going to
So
have to
please
wrap up.
do that.
Okay.
Please
thank
do
you.
that.
Thank you.
And I would really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. DP Burba.
Through you, Mr. Chair, DP has submitted a video delegation.
Sure.
I'm just going to bring it up here.
Association. I'm one of hundreds of residents living within the estates of Credit Ridge who opposes this development. My neighbors and I submitted detailed presentations and reports during our delegations on December 12, 2022. I hope that the Planning and Development Committee had an opportunity to review these documents. We believe that there were concerns raised at that time that should still be considered today. Firstly, we raised concerns that the applicant should be required to submit an updated traffic impact study because, one, the data collected for the traffic impact study is quite old for some of the main intersections. Some of this data was from 2017, 2018, 2019, and traffic has actually worsened in this area within the last 6 years. Two, the traffic impact study didn't account for all of the new developments proposed close to the site. For example, 2 projects that consisted of multi-story buildings were missing from the study. This meant 581 residential units were unaccounted for. The traffic impact study indicated that northbound and southbound movements at Mississauga Road and Queen Street West were noted to be over capacity. 4. The report captured that Mississauga Road and Queen Street West would exceed capacity by 2026 and suggested that the Region of Peel widen Mississauga Road sooner than originally planned. 5. The report also captured that Credit View Road and Queen Street West southbound left turn movement would exceed the available taper provisions. So my question for planning is, why were the 5 issues I highlighted also not a concern for planning when reviewing this applicant's traffic impact study? Next, we raised concerns about our area not being a transit-oriented community at this time or in the foreseeable future. Thus, the justification for approving proposals for high-density projects is questionable. Having Zoom service Queen Street West, where buses go half empty, does not entail a true transit-oriented community. Those living in this area know that this is a car-dependent area. We are not close to a major transit station. We are not close to a provincial highway, a hospital, a mall, or a post-secondary institution. In fact, we're probably many, many years away from potentially getting a BRT that services Queen Street West. Not Queen Street East, which is much different from Queen Street West. The Queen Street Highway 7 BRT project is currently in stage 2 of the project life cycle. The preliminary design business case that will be created in stage 2 is estimated to be completed by 2024 to 2025. In December 2022, our sources told us Brampton does not have a budget or a funding plan for the BRT. So my question is, can Council or Planning confirm when BRT will come to Queen Street West? And can they also confirm whether there is now a funding plan or a budget in place to help towards Brampton's share of BRT-related costs? My third question for planning is, why does planning support this application when the applicant has proposed building heights that are much more than the max heights planning themselves proposed in the June 2022 city-initiated amendment to the Credit Valley Secondary Plan? Finally, residents understand that we need more homes in Ontario. We understand there are incentives from the province, like the Building Faster Fund, for municipalities that meet housing targets. However, as a city, you also need to ensure medium to high density is done properly so that it benefits the city and all residents. Residents that currently live here, as well as residents that will move into these developments. Perhaps I'm being naive, but I believe the city can encourage applicants to build high density in areas that will benefit from it and is equipped for it, and thus still access financial incentives from the province. Rejecting medium to high density projects along Queen Street West doesn't necessarily mean the city cannot meet their housing targets. So lastly, my question is, can Planning and Council please identify the addresses of 10 to 16 story projects that have been approved in Brampton that are directly adjacent to upscale executive housing special policy areas that are zoned as residential 1? I would like to know where in Brampton this has been done and it worked out, and where approval has been granted recently for something similar. Thank you for your time. I look forward to members of your team contacting me with a response to my questions.
Thank you. We are all done with the delegations. Do any members of council have any questions? I see Councillor Vicente.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the delegations for coming today. I know that myself and Councillor Santos and you and the mayor as well have had many conversations with you to try to get this into a space where it will work better than what was originally proposed. With regards to the sustainability scores, myself and Councillor Santos and of course all of council do agree with you. And so through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, what is it that we can do given the staff report now and the bronze sustainability score, can we ask for and extract a silver, for example, from this through site plan?
Through the chair, I'll start and then defer to staff as needed. Oftentimes, we'll find that as we go through, as staff works with the applicant through site plan, that's when you get into the details as to types of materials that could be used, perhaps some additions to things that can increase the sustainability score. That's certainly our endeavor to do that. And certainly what I'm hearing from residents today and sort of the direction from council, not only on this particular application, but in general, is to aim for higher sustainability scores, as was mentioned in the MTSA discussion. So certainly we would take that as direction to work with the applicant to achieve a higher score than, I believe it's 47 in this particular case. I'm not sure what the threshold is for silver, but we would definitely aim to be higher than 47.
So through chair, can that be then codified in today's proceedings?
Through the chair, if it's the will of council, we could take that as direction and perhaps baked into a recommendation of some kind.
Through you, Mr. Chair, perhaps I can just add to Commissioner Ganish's comments really for the audience's understanding as it relates to the sustainability scores. While the sustainability scores and the environmental planning staff that work on sustainability scoring requirements really aren't reporting through to my division directly, I'm understanding generally of the work that they've been doing over the years. And although it's noted that there's a sustainability score here of bronze. I do want to really have everyone know that notwithstanding the bronze category designation that's achieved here, that the bronze category has been progressing, where in previous years it was that to achieve a bronze designation, a certain score was required, as it is now, but really it was approximately, I believe, a year or perhaps 2 years ago now, where it was that the bronze score, to be able to achieve a bronze score, the amount of score to be achieved by any one application was increased. So applicants have been required to increase the score and improve the jobs they're doing on sustainability matters as they're making applications. So all this to say that staff is progressively pushing the limits in order to achieve what is deemed to be a bronze score. A bronze that is achieved today isn't the same as a bronze that was achieved from several years ago. So granted, that said, we obviously want everyone to try to pursue higher scores than bronze, and we are always having those conversations with our applicants and all of our private industry partners. We can continue to do that here with this applicant as well as we're embarking on the site plan applications with them. Yeah, there are items that we can look to, such as increasing size of the calipers of the trees, items like that, but we can definitely have that conversation with the applicant.
So then, is there a possibility then with this evening and what we do here now, can we expect to have that sustainability score brought up to silver?
Yeah. Through the chair, I just confirmed with the applicant's consultant who's here that they would be more than happy to work with us to increase the sustainability score through the site plan process.
Okay. And through you, Mr. Chair, I just have one more question. So some of the residents brought up concerns with regards to schools. What's the situation there, through you, Chair?
Through the chair, it's my understanding that both school boards did not raise any concerns with capacity for this particular development application. Part of the recommendation report includes an appendices that has comments from all external agencies, and that was denoted in both the, I think it's Appendix 9 of this report.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, I have no further questions. Happy to move the report.
Okay. Councillor Vicente, I have a motion. Sorry, who does? No, the delegation, they're all done, sorry. Next, Councilor.
Sorry,
No,
through you,
delegation
Mr. Chair.
done.
So these are not statutory public notice items, these are recommendation reports. So if people wish to delegate, they had to advise the clerk's office before the meeting. At the start of the meeting, council or committee sets its agenda, and we'll deal with the delegations that pre-registered. There will be an opportunity for public question period at the end of the meeting. You may ask a question about a recommendation that the committee may make tonight.
Okay.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, just for a moment, and before Councillor Power speaks, trying to take into account the comments of the delegations here with the questions that we just asked staff, just so you know. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Powers?
Thank you, and through the chairs, could I ask how many jobs are being created from this development? Or what is the ratio for the job?
Through the chair, I wouldn't know offhand how many direct jobs are going to be created after the development. Certainly with any development, there's construction-related jobs. At this point in time, I wouldn't know what that is.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can just add a little further there that in addition to the residential development that's proposed, there is also zone permissions being added to the site for retail at the base of the development. The retail is allowed. We're going to be working with the applicant towards delivering that. It's not a requirement at this point in time, but something that the applicant noted that they are looking to deliver on the site. So it is permitted by way of the dual zoning of the bylaw. So there will likely be additional jobs created if the retail is provided at the base.
Councilor Powers, any more questions? Okay, thank you. Any questions online? Okay, thank you. I have a motion moved by Councilor Vicente to approve the staff report and receive the delegation. All in favor? Okay, thank you. The motion carries. Moving on to 6.4, we have delegation that was withdrawn. confirmed. We're gonna withdraw the delegation? Yep. Okay, moving on to staff presentations and planning reports. We have 7.1, which was held by Councillor Tour. Application to amend the official plan, Callaway REIT, including Smart Centers REIT. Councillor Tour, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. Just looking at this application here in Ward 8 by the Smart Centers. I'm just trying to pull it up on the screen here, but looking at the concept plan that they provided and everything that's included in the report, it looks like there's no immediate development plan for this application. This is just a request for an official plan amendment. One, just out of lack of experience, is this like standard practice? We only come in for an OPA where an applicant doesn't come in for a ZBA or a site plan with it?
Through the chair, this is not your typical type of development application. Typically, you have an OPA, or sorry, an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment running in concurrence. It's my understanding that the applicant is looking to have relief from the Pearson, the historical sort of Pearson flight path radii for height to permit potential use for long-term care and or daycare with respect to noise from aircrafts. Presumably, over time, the applicant would then contemplate the type of development they foresee that fits within those two permissions, and then bring forth any zoning bylaw amendment that may be necessary and or site plan.
So if we amend the official plan for them, only that allows them to go to GTA and speak about the air traffic routes and those plans.
Through the chair, amending the official plan would allow those two uses, the daycare and long-term care uses that are not currently allowed in there right now in the official plan.
Okay. And my confusion is just regarding the lack of like a zoning bylaw amendment or seeing like what their future plan is at all. Like it's like kind of shooting in the dark and saying, doing an official plan amendment without knowing if they're coming through with anything, or I don't know if they're speculating for a future development or speculating to maybe do a land severance at a later time, or whatever the case is. Not to say that we wouldn't support development of the property, but not knowing what we're eventually going to support is just kind of hard to discuss this file, like it has nothing on it.
Through the chair, absolutely fair question. I do recall having the same discussions with staff and the applicant, and certainly, pending council's decision tonight, we would endeavor to have future discussions with the applicant and the ward councilors to better understand what their future intentions are of the land. I know this council has been very passionate around items around community hubs, for instance, and looking at redevelopment of these REITs, especially, again, going back to the MTSA discussion, we see the changes in the marketplace. In my opinion, REITs present an opportunity to do some innovative redevelopment opportunities, so certainly we would endeavor to have that meeting.
Yeah, and that's my concern on this is that, like, doing this, and we have so many REITs that own properties across the city that could be redeveloped in a really good way, and we talk about complete communities all the time. But I don't necessarily think this is the right way to do it.
If I could, through the chair, recognizing that a forthcoming site plan would be needed, one could contemplate that site plan is going to necessitate changes within the concept plan you see here, which would then trigger a zoning bylaw, which then opens up the opportunity for us to have a little bit more leverage, shall we say, to have a more complete community type of development. But again, it would be subject to better understanding what the applicant envisions for this parcel.
Yeah, and just final comment before Council Power would like to speak. To me, it's just unusual because we wouldn't do this if this was like a 2-acre landowner coming in for an official plan amendment without any, like, it would be very unusual.
through the chair, in my time here at the city, this is the first time I've seen something like this. But under the guise of the Planning Act, we have to sort of proceed with this application.
It is
because it meets
procedure,
the
of course,
criteria.
but I'm just saying it is unusual.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all, thank you.
Councillor Powers?
Thank you, and through the chair. So if we amend the official plan for this application, what's the likelihood, or is it an ability to stop it from Smart Centers to just flip the land and sell it?
Through the chair, I can't speak to what the future business intentions of Smart Centers would be based on council's decision today. One could contemplate they could do that in absence of even seeking this approval.
Any other questions? Okay.
I'd like to just propose a motion that we defer this item and deal with it at a later time when we have more information or there's an opportunity to engage with the applicant.
Okay.
That's what I would propose.
Okay. Just for procedure, I'll say Councillor Vicente moved the deferral, so he's
Happy to defer.
Certainly, Councillor Tour is free to move
Okay,
the
okay, I
deferral,
thought,
but
yeah, you
there's no debate now, so we're in a
Okay.
deferral motion, and
Yep.
we'll have a deferral vote, but is it deferral indefinitely pending an outcome of some further discussion, or is it to a particular time period?
Suggestion from Commissioner Paul.
We shouldn't be debating this. Deferral we need clarity, I guess, maybe through them.
If I could, and I'll look to the clerk to help me walk the fine line here. What I'm hearing from Councillor Tor is the need for more clarity as to the intentions of the applicant that may supersede the request before council today. So what I might suggest is that if there was a deferral, it'd be a deferral back to staff to have further discussions with the applicant prior to bringing forth a future recommendation report.
So through you, Mr. Chair, then that's a referral, so to referral back to staff, which is debatable on the merits
Yep.
of the referral, if that's the will of and
Referral
intent
back
of the
to staff
council.
is good. Councillor Tour has a referral motion on the floor. Do any members have any questions? Seeing and hearing none, there's none online. Okay, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor? Motion carries. Moving on, 7.2, staff report regarding application to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw. 1276850 Canada Inc., 11937 Gorway Drive and 6539 Mayfield Road. Councillor Tour, do you wish to speak to this?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to see that we have something like this coming in our area at the corner of Gorway and Mayfield. Along Mayfield, I'm happy to see final developments happening across many intersections on Mayfield in our area. So very supportive of this. Just would like to state it for the record, and I guess take back for staff is that at the site plan stage, if we can look at the separation between the development and the residential area behind it in terms of the fencing or the barrier requirement, whatever we have in that case, similar to other developments that we've been talking about on Mayfield Road. That's all I'd like to see on this, but other than that, I'm very supportive of this.
Thank you. We have a motion moved by Councillor Tour to receive the report. Is anybody opposed? Approve the report. Is anybody opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that carries. 7.3, moving on, staff report, application to amend the zoning bylaw, 2820453 Ontario Inc., CanDivCon, Limited, north side of Old Castlemore between Clarkway Drive and Highway 50, Ward 10. I believe Councillor Tour, you held that.
Can I ask questions on the applicant? Mr.
No,
Clerk?
it's just staff. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Just on this file, if part of the recommendations, if we could please include, sorry, I'm trying to pull this up, if you can give me a second.
Did you send it to the clerk yet?
I think through staff, there is a potential amendment to this
Yeah.
motion.
Yeah.
The staff recommendations, which is just on the screen there. Is that the intent, Council?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion as amended on the screen, and I have Councilor Chua moving the recommendations as amended. Is anybody opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that carries. Thank you. 7.4 we already dealt with. You have a point of order?
I am
Yep.
requesting you, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask committee's indulgence to reopen 7.4 so that we can add into the wording of the recommendations that we approved, that staff work with the applicants to obtain at least a silver sustainability score on the project through the site plan process.
Okay, let's take it stage by stage. So I have a motion to reopen the agenda. Is anybody opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that carries. Okay, just if you could rephrase that for staff.
Thank you,
for
Mr. Chair. And
7.4.
so requesting that the clerk note that I am moving that in addition to the other recommendations that move 7.4, that we ask that staff work with the applicant to obtain at least a silver sustainability score through the site plan process. And with that, Mr. Chair, also moving all of the other items that we voted on already.
Sure. We have a motion by Councilor Vicente. It's amending the recommendations. Is everybody in favor of the amended recommendations? Yes. The motion carries. Moving on, we have correspondence. Could I just take one motion to receive all the correspondence as amended?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe most of the,
Yeah,
all the
just
pieces
in
of
case I'm
correspondence
missing
were
something.
adopted with, or received with all the
Okay,
corresponding
so
items.
okay, just wanted to make sure. So then we're at council question period. Do any members of council have any questions? Seeing and hearing none. Now we are at public question period. And I see some members of the public coming forward. If you could just state your name for the record. You can fill it out after too. Yeah.
I can do it later on. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and rest of the council members. My name is Samir Shah. I represent Credit Valley Residents Association. And during this public question period, I have a few questions related to today's meeting as well as some points. So I would start briefly with thanking everyone, starting with Mr. Vicente to asking planning team to revisit compatibility sustainability score, and coming to the other points. So I have a few questions around that which can go on record, and then I hope all my questions as well as question put up for earlier by DP on behalf of CVRA are answered in writing. My first question, which is related to the sustainability aspect, what about compatibility and all other concerns which have been asked by CVRA residents over and over again? Just to give some examples, where is the consolidated study? We still hear that, okay, school board for this specific application has not come back with any concerns around that or any objection. What about all the files which are in development, in application, along the Queen Street West, between Mississauga Road and Chinguzi? We haven't seen a single consolidated report. So my first question, when can we get that? My second question for record, thank you for explaining the north side perspective. What about south side? One of the delegates have shared that south side are also executive homes which have really beautiful backyard and people enjoying that for many years, whether they have swimming pool or not. So can we have a 360-degree aerial view looking from this application site at a prescribed height or revised height, and how it would match and be compatible with existing neighborhood. So that was my next question. And going back to the earlier point as well, when can we have all the consolidated reports from all the agencies, not only school board? How Peel region or broken down Peel region in 2025 will continue supporting the basic needs of the residents, existing residents, future residents. There are number of incidents, examples, frustration around the level of service, whether it is emergency service, 911, police services, all those safety concerns are definitely well known in this area and should be looked. And I recommend and request the planning team, city team, regional team, provincial team to come to the residents with a projection how those service level agreements, which was part of one of my previous presentations, that the SLAs for various services, whether it is by city or region, are not being met. Who is responsible for that, and who will be answerable to the public and to the residents for all the SLAs on Peel as well as city services website. And last but not the least, I think last year when we started this process, Mr. Mayor as well as some of the council members were suggested that do public consultation, work collaboratively with the public. Why can't we have a process where all the parties involved, whether it is planning team, councillors, developers, MPs, MPPs, and public, everybody coming to table, series of discussions and not rushing through a timeline where, oh, we have 30 minutes, let's finish it off. So not to check, but to do collaborative process when City of Brampton can do that for the residents. Those are my questions, and I'll be following up with email as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you for asking questions in public question period.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Al, do you want to say anything? And I would ask that you leave your name and number so we can follow up with you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to offer that, given the multitude of questions that the residents had, that it'd probably be better for staff to have an offline discussion with the residents. So by all means, staff can see the contact information for the gentleman and give the gentleman a call back to have some discussion about really the details of what was included within a recommendation report and help with any other details beyond that the resident would like.
Okay, and then we also have Councillor Vicente here who will also make sure. And Councillor Santos. Thank you. Do any other members have questions? Okay, well, it's 15 minutes, so we've had 5 minutes? 5 minutes, okay, we'll wait. Fact check.
Hi, guys. Point of order is what's happening right now. I can hear some whispers, but don't know if anything else is
We're
happening.
waiting for a member of the public to return for a public question period. Yeah. 15 minutes, yeah. Okay, she's not coming back. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, so now there's no closed section, so we'll move on to adjournment. Our next meeting is Monday, September 11th, 2022. And I have motion moved by Councilor Power to adjourn tonight's meeting. All those in favor? And the meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.